What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of I'm Sick and I Don't Want to Do This, but we're here anyways. Also known as the 5280 Podcast on the MHRT Network. I'm your host, as always, Manungus Creevy, alongside my co-host Cameron Parker, Gage Madrid. Glenn could not get away from his in-home nurse. He is currently eating his tapioca pudding all by his lonesome. He's not here to defend himself, so I can say what I want. How you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing good. I like the fact that we're getting a little bit more of a monotone mic tonight. I like the fact that, this is if you were back at a classroom and you were a student in a university and you wanted to sit through a really boring, class, if you will, of someone talking in monotone, then, Mike actually talking in monotone tonight actually might be for you.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not a fan.
5280 Podcast, where we specialize in boredom.
That's what we try to do.
At least this time of year. At least this time of year.
In boredom and in Mike making terrible noises.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Everybody's picking on me tonight. Jeez. All right. So a couple little things to go through before we get into, honestly, there's not a whole lot going on. But a couple little things to get into before we get into looking at free agents and who might come in. We were talking about Pete Carmichael and Jim Leonard last week. They officially have titles, and it was named after the show last week. So Pete Carmichael is officially the senior offensive assistant, and Jim Leonard is the defensive pass game coordinator / defensive backs coach.
There it is.
So official.
I still say that I think at this point the Jim Leonard move is the move of the entire offseason right now, because obviously that was like the big, move right now and like right before kickoff. But I feel like once free agency hits, that move, the Jim Leonard move, the Leonard move will be so swept under the rug that I feel like people are going to forget about it a little bit. And then it's going to go from a big move to maybe one of the most, if not the most underrated move of the entire offseason.
Yep.
Absolutely, man. I think what he's going to bring to that room, the experience that he has, I've actually, since the last show, did a little bit more homework on Jim Leonard's acumen and what he's going to bring to the table, and I'm really excited.
Yeah.
Like, dude, I think that he's got a lot of really good schematic ideas that he's going to implement, and I think that if they can get some of these issues tweaked out with the Broncos' defensive front, especially on the interior, oh man, you combine that secondary with what we can potentially get up front. Oh, it's going to be scary.
Yeah. Let's go into Bob Gainer's question. I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the draft, but probably not much because we've talked about it before.
For sure.
Bob wants to know who we're going to draft in the first round. I am still under the belief it'll be JJ McCarthy.
It is the $1 million question, and to be perfectly honest, Bob, it's a loaded question. When you're asking the question, who are we going to draft? That usually means who will it be, right? Not necessarily who we think it's going to be,
Probably a punter.
Or probably like not necessarily who we actually want it to be, right? So it's actually more like what it's leaning toward. And I'll tell you right now, I'm with Mike. I'm under the impression the way things are trending right now and the steam that we're getting right now with JJ McCarthy, and JJ McCarthy, if you will, solidifying himself as a top 15 pick. It seems to me, and of course, there was something that came out actually within the last couple hours, if you will, from like Paul Allen. It's been circling on the like Instagram and everything. But it's been circled around that Sean Payton absolutely loves JJ McCarthy. And don't get it twisted. He may necessarily be assistant quarterback with what he had at Michigan, but it's the offense that he ran at Michigan, right? That's the offense that he ran at Michigan. And especially when we kind of look at it, you kind of compare it to Brock Purdy, right? Brock Purdy did what was asked of him at the San Francisco 49ers. But I'll tell you what, he made those plays. He made those plays necessary to get them to the Super Bowl and kind of erasing a little bit of some of that game manager narrative, as he was heading into the Super Bowl a little bit. So I think you're starting to kind of look at it a little bit that JJ McCarthy may be that type of guy that Sean Payton truly falls in love with.
Absolutely. I mean, Sean Payton's looking for a guy who can operate well within the structure of the offense. And if you look at Michigan's offense, it's probably the closest thing to a pro-style offense that you're going to see in college football. So I really feel like it's a perfect grooming situation for JJ McCarthy. I'm not sure. How long was he starting there?
JJ McCarthy, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, he started almost like all his years in Michigan. Let me go take a look here. But if I'm not mistaken, he was a starter for all 4 years. In fact, I mean, you can take for whatever it's worth, but I mean, JJ McCarthy was, according to Harbaugh, like the best quarterback, in the draft. And I mean, that's what you would hope he would say in terms of, being the quarterback that everybody's going to be wanting, at least for him, right? But we know he's not going to take JJ McCarthy. Yeah, he started. He started 3 years. Take it back. He started 3 years. But still, he didn't have a senior year, so he left. After his junior year, so freshman, sophomore, junior year. But he didn't have a lot of completions and attempts, if you will, in 2021. But ever since then, he's put up a lot of numbers. He is, according to some, he is well regarded as the most impressive quarterback and the best quarterback to wear a Michigan Wolverine uniform. And we know that there is a certain quarterback down there in Michigan who wore that Michigan Wolverines uniform and is maybe well regarded as the greatest quarterback who ever lived. And that would be number 12. And that'd be number 12.
Brian Greasy? No, but in all seriousness, I think, especially with JJ McCarthy's young age, he only has up to go, man. I think that once he gets into the pro level, he's going to have that advantage of being in that Jim Harbaugh offense for the past 3 seasons and knowing NFL style terminology. And he's taken snaps from under center, just little stuff like that, where it's not going to be such a heavy learning curve for him. So I've heard the argument that you don't necessarily want to start JJ McCarthy right away, but what I've seen from him on tape, I actually think you can get away with starting him right out the get-go, as long as you put him in a good position to be successful. And if there's a coach out there that I trust to do that, it's Sean Payton.
Yeah.
Now, before we go any further, Cam, what the hell is on your hat? What is that?
You don't recognize the Nuggets logo when you see it?
Okay, I thought it was the Michelin Man for a minute. Like, why are you wearing a Michelin hat? Like I said, I'm sick. Leave me alone. That's what I saw.
Guys, admittedly, he has an out. He is sick.
All right. So something else that and Gage brought it up and commented on it and made some videos on it. Mike Tannenbaum, right? Like, this basically shows why you were the Jets GM and are no longer the Jets GM. So he came up with a trade proposal and then had another take on top of that. So his trade proposal was a straight-up player swap. Jerry Jeudy for Zach Wilson. It's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And then the second thing he said was that Russell Wilson would back up Aaron Rodgers.
Well, he's definitely associated with the Jets in some capacity.
I think that second take is even worse than the first one somehow. I mean, Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers in the same quarterback room, first of all, would be hilarious. Russell Wilson in the same quarterback room as Nathaniel Hackett, again, would be objectively hilarious. And I don't know, man. There's a real big part of me that feels like Russell doesn't want to go down that backup route. I think that he wants to be guaranteed a starting job, and if not, then he's going to basically hold out and wait maybe for a starter to go down in training camp and then sign. Because I don't know, man. I think Russell Wilson's ego is too big for him to really accept that backup role and accept that maybe is his way to get back into being a starter. I just don't know if that's the route that Russell Wilson, the guy who has started from day one of his NFL career and has only ever been a backup for 2 games in his NFL career, and that was this past season, does he want to do that? That's a really big question that we have to answer here. So that alone is asinine. But pivoting it back to Jerry Jeudy for Zach Wilson, I broke this down on my channel. Zach Wilson, one of the least efficient quarterbacks last year, even though he was asked to do almost nothing in that offense except for super safe conservative stuff to mitigate his extremely reckless style of play. And even that didn't produce good results. So you're not going to get anything good out of a Zach Wilson reclamation project. I've already talked about it. If you're going to salvage an ex-Jets quarterback's career, Sam Darnold is the much better candidate, who actually showed some promise in his later years in his later time in Carolina in 2022. And then in 2023, he's been nothing but gassed up by Brian Griese and other 49ers coaches. Clearly, he's developed well out there in San Fran. So, no, man. And when it comes to Jerry Jeudy, yeah, I am in the opinion that the Broncos should move on from Jerry Jeudy. But you can get a draft pick by trading him, not swapping him for a backup caliber reclamation project quarterback who I actually was a fan of coming out of BYU in Zach Wilson. He was my QB1 that year ahead of Trevor Lawrence. And I know a lot of other analysts that felt that same way, but a lot of his issues translated over into the NFL, and a lot of those problems never got corrected. So Zach Wilson, no.
I smirked a little bit when you said backup caliber behind Zach Wilson's name.
I mean, we're also talking about a quarterback that just cannot beat, the likes of guys like Mike White, right? I mean, like, or like Mike
Tim
White
Boyle.
is actually Tim Boyle, like, and they're playing.
Trevor Siemian.
I mean, so like, I think I think it's at least funny and it's hilarious that it has taken this offseason for the Jets to realize, oh, you know what? We need a backup quarterback. Like, you should have done it last year. And actually, had you done it last year, you actually might have had a decent chance and possibly even, scratching the playoffs possibly in 2023. You had your opportunity, by the way, Gage, to say Tannen booty cheeks or Tannen bum. But, thanks for at least giving me the benefit of the doubt to say, Tannenbaum, on the air. Because that was
booty cheeks.
Exactly.
Hey, man,
Yeah.
I don't want to insult
Got you
the guy,
covered.
but that's such an asinine take.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, regardless of how you feel about Jerry Jeudy, regardless of how you feel about Zach Wilson, I don't know how many times I need to say this on air. Like, and I know this is sometimes even, posted every once in a while on social media too. And some people may think it's a fair trade. Some people may think it's, an asinine trade, to use the term you use, because it could be probably a popular term that we use here tonight. But like, you just rarely see player for player trades, like player for player swaps anymore. The most famous player for player trade, as we all know, at least for our sake, was Champ Bailey and Clinton Portis. Like, that was one of the most famous that will go down in history as far as the player for player trade. And it's just like, just because that was so successful doesn't necessarily mean that all the other trades or all the other player for player trades after that is going to end up being successful. And especially one that involves a Zach Wilson and a Jerry Jeudy trade, which it's still 50-50 whether or not Jerry Jeudy is actually going to be a part of Sean Payton's scheme, or is it going to be Cortland Sutton? So it's just like, it's still one of those like 50-50 picks there. But still, you're going to be trading him for assets. You're not going to be necessarily getting a player back in return. If you are able to get a player back in return, that's not Zach Wilson caliber. That is chef's kiss, man. Good on you, George Payton. Good on you, Sean Payton, for actually, getting that type of thing done. But it's just not going to happen. Those player for player swaps are a thing of the past.
Yeah. And one of the other big things, and I think we've talked a little bit about it before, you're hearing a lot of Russell Wilson's name when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers, as far as the Steelers trading for him. But it was also brought up that if you trade Russell Wilson to Pittsburgh, do include Mitchell Trubisky in said trade and
they cut him
to Denver.
Yeah, he's
Did
gone.
they cut him? I thought so. Okay.
He's gone.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they cut Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah, I think barring that development, I mean, we're still looking at the four we talked about last week: Sam Darnold, Browning, Jones, and Jameis Winston. I still think those would be the ones you go after, not like a Mitchell Trubisky or I still don't think Gardner Minshew would be a good fit. Baker Mayfield will resign, but we'll get into that. But Mitchell Trubisky is a no.
Thank you, Mike, for mentioning Sam Darnold first, since that was my guy last week. So
I'll tell you, I'm getting more on the Darnold train. I'm liking the idea.
You are welcome. You're welcome. Don't make me sing the Moana song.
Because of you.
What can I say? But you're welcome.
I'm still in a scenario where I'm going to be sorely disappointed if the Broncos don't come out of the first round of the NFL draft with the quarterback.
He's going to grab his pitchfork.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the Denver Broncos cannot piss around because we may not be in a position next year to draft another quarterback. It's not a foregone conclusion the Denver Broncos are going to suck next year. Even if they have like a Sam Darnold level quarterback, it could be a mediocre train here, and we could be sitting in quarterback purgatory once again. So I like Sam Darnold, but if we're going to bring in Sam Darnold, I don't think that should dissuade the Denver Broncos from drafting a quarterback in the first round as well.
So this was my other question, right? Like we talked a little bit last week about the potential salary cap that we'll have available to us. Would we be able to bring in 2 quarterbacks, or are we talking bringing in one, leaving Stidham, or letting go of Stidham and bringing in a cheaper option? So that would be like, let's say we bring in a Sam Darnold to trade and bring in a Jameis Winston. Is Jameis Winston going to be cheaper than Stidham?
Well, Sam Darnold isn't even going to be a trade. He's a free agent.
Yeah, he's a free agent. But when it comes to Jameis, sorry, go ahead, Cam.
No.
I'm going to check you on that one. Hold on.
Wait, but I think the thing is, like, you can sign too, because I mean, like, Sam Darnold. I know some people on social media are thinking like he's going to cost $10 million. Any quarterback that actually will cost you $10 million and is sitting on the bench is just going to be a sign that Jarrett Stidham's not going to be on the roster, right? That's just the point. It's like the moment that he signs a $10 million contract is the moment where Jarrett Stidham's just going to be off the books. And so you're talking about a situation where if Sam Darnold signs, you're talking roughly between the $2 to $5 million, a year range, which, for Darnold, you're talking probably only 1 year. And so
he is a free agent.
Yeah. And so especially for like 1 year too, like I don't my thing is, and Gage, you can talk after this if you will. But what I was going to say is that, like, if they sign to, that to me tells me they're not going after the draft. Mm-hmm. And if they sign one quarterback, for me, it would depend on the quarterback, right? It would depend on the quarterback. So if you sign the Kirk Cousins of the world, if you sign the Baker Mayfields of the world, that's obviously, triggering to us. Okay, Baker Mayfield, Kirk Cousins, they're coming in. They're going to be the bona fide starter, week 1. Like, they're going to be the guy. But you sign a Sam Darnold, you sign possibly a Mac Jones, you sign a Jameis Winston. It's not necessarily a guarantee. A Jacoby Brissett, it's not necessarily a guarantee they will be starting week 1, which still leaves you that door. That still leaves you the door of opportunity to draft that quarterback in the first round. So really that's just the thing that I was just going to hit on, is that it would just depend on if they sign 2, well, then that should eliminate any idea the Broncos have of signing or sorry, not signing, but drafting a quarterback.
Sure. And I don't necessarily see a scenario, to be honest, where they do sign 2 quarterbacks.
Agree.
I think that if they sign one and maybe keep Stidham as the backup, that's a possibility. But obviously, if they are able to land a Kirk Cousins or even less realistic Baker Mayfield, then yeah, we're not having this conversation. Yeah. The quarterback hole's been plugged. But I'm operating on the more realistic scenario, that they're not going to get one of those guys. I'm still strongly of the belief that Baker Mayfield again will end up back in Tampa Bay, and I still think there's a chance that Minnesota and and Kirk Cousins get something done, because I think that Minnesota has realized life without Kirk Cousins isn't all that fun. So I don't know. I don't see a scenario where those guys are going to be available to the Broncos. So I've always been operating under like the Jameis Winston, Sam Darnold, God forbid, Mac Jones. Like I've been on like that caliber of player for a while now for the Denver Broncos free agent quarterback. I think everybody knows at this point I'm a fan of them bringing in Jameis Winston. Gardner Minshew, also a very solid number 2 option, I feel like.
Yes, Mike, take it in. He's an option.
You're just hating on Mac Jones because I like him, and you want Gardner Minshew because I don't like him. That's
I'm
the only
hating on
reason
Mac
why.
Jones because I don't like Mac Jones. It's that simple.
I just don't think he's
Gates has got room full of just posters of Mac Jones. But he's like, so I'm not supporting him.
It's like that scene in what is it? Was it Billy Madison? These writes the names off the list.
Yep.
It's just like that scene. No, like honestly, Gardner Minshew is actually an intriguing fit. I mean, when he was at Washington State, he was running a Mike Leach offense, which is an air raid offense, and and necessarily like that's to a certain extent what Breeze was running with Sean Payton at a point in time for almost the majority of his career. Was almost like an air raid offense, but it was an efficient air raid offense in the pros. And so like I think that Gardner Minshew would be so fun with Payton. And if we're going to talk about Baker Mayfield to a certain extent, he's a poor man's Baker with the way that he is, his swagger, and the way that he is, in a locker room, and he's clearly beloved in locker rooms. And there's a reason why Shane Steichen went out and signed him, to be in that quarterback room. And frankly, the Indianapolis Colts don't actually make a stretch for the playoffs if it's not for the play of Gardner Minshew in some of those games during the season. So like he can be a legitimate option for the Broncos that I think maybe is kind of flying under the radar.
And that's also a part of it for me too. It's like if the Broncos are going to go with a veteran stopgap, I want it to be a fun veteran stopgap. I don't want it to be somebody like, let's just be honest, Jarrett Stidham, who this fan base is going to grow increasingly impatient with every single week. Like, let's just be honest. I've made my opinions very clear on Jarrett Stidham ever since watching him in training camp. I don't think he's a starting caliber quarterback. And if the Broncos go into week 1 with Jarrett Stidham as their starter, I'm going to be counting down the days basically until he gets benched, because I don't think he would last a full 17-game season.
Yeah,
that's why
Ben DiNucci. Woo!
Hey, man, I even think Ben DiNucci would be more fun than Jarrett Stidham. That's just me. That's why if we are going to especially have a rookie quarterback sit behind this veteran and we want to buy that rookie more time, we need a veteran who's going to pass along with the fan base and the media for the next few weeks. And I think you can pass off a Gardner Minshew, a Jameis Winston, a Sam Darnold pretty easily for several weeks until the seat gets hot, at least from the fan base and the media, and then we start pounding the table for the rookie to come in. And I feel like if that person is Jarrett Stidham, it's going to be a much shorter leash, and we're going to be pounding the table a lot sooner.
And I'll bring up the point again. I feel like Sean Payton had this year in mind when he signed Jarrett Stidham. I will bring that point up again and again. I think he had this year in mind when it came to Jarrett Stidham. So much so that it's one of the reasons why Sam Darnold is on my radar. It's like one of the reasons why he's on my radar, because I feel like when he signed that big, massive contract, we were all alarmed by it. We were all alarmed by the idea of why is he signing Stidham to a $10+ million a year deal? Why is he doing this? And then obviously the benching of Russell Wilson. He plays Stidham for the last 2 games. He wins a game with Stidham, which frankly, even just winning a game with Stidham should give the Broncos enough confidence heading into next year that frankly, you may actually not win 4 to 5 games with Jarrett Stidham. You actually may win more with Jarrett Stidham just because of the simple coaching that Sean Payton has and has to offer. I'm not saying he's going to be there for the full season, but that should at least give you enough confidence in how he was able to operate the offense. Because again, Stidham operated that offense the exact same way Russell Wilson was operating that offense, which is an indictment on Russell Wilson. To say that again, that is an indictment on Russell Wilson. And so much so that I think it's very likely that Stidham is your starter week 1. The question just becomes, do you have a young buck in the reins who is your future guy, and whoever that is, they better be sure that he is that guy, obviously, and hopefully that guy is, maybe going to be wearing number 9. And maybe Sean Payton has this thing for a guy that wears number 9. Maybe that's why he likes JJ McCarthy, because he wears number 9. Maybe he likes Michael Penix Jr. You know why? Because he wears number 9.
So I think that we can all agree that going forward, the perfect quarterback room for the Broncos is Tim Tebow, Taysom Hill, Ben DiNucci.
Yes.
Done. Super Bowl.
Start, bench, cut.
DiNucci start.
DiNucci's a cut for me.
Cut for me.
Could you imagine the packages though with Tim Tebow and Taysom Hill? Like jump passes galore, man. Like
I think I'm starting Taysom. I'm benching DiNucci. I'm cutting Tebow.
Wow.
Pop-up pass read option game would be fun though.
Who would even like? You'd have Jaleel McLaughlin. You'd have Javonte Williams, Taysom Hill, Tim Tebow. Who's getting the ball?
At that point, though, I would just sign Derrick Henry just like
there
say
you go.
Screw it.
Throw him in there.
Yeah, just say screw it. We're gonna have this like big or draft Braylon Allen. But I have like the biggest like running back room or running the ball room that's in the National Football League with like Tim Tebow and Taysom Hill. So like your goal line package is almost like your permanent package the entire way down. You're
running like a modern Wildcat offense here.
Redefine tush push and
wing T, wing T offense, full house, like the full house offense. Like, let's go to the triple option, exactly the way that Nebraska would run things in 1990, in the 1990s and the 1970s and whatever. Like, let's just go back to the old school football.
I knew Nebraska was coming in there at some point.
Exactly.
Listen, I love running the football, so that wouldn't be the worst scenario for me.
Baltimore, man.
Yeah, seriously. Look, I love running the ball. It's my favorite style of offense is a run-heavy offense. I just love running the ball.
See, I think we all can agree that would be a great quarterback room.
It would be quite the
it would be an eclectic quarterback room.
Might as well sign Philip Lindsay out of retirement and Kendall Hinton as well. We could just have like the ultimate
Brandon Jacobs
quarterback room.
Yeah. By the way, I don't know why it reminded me of this, but with Russell Wilson going to the proposal with Aaron Rodgers, could you imagine the New York media? Could you imagine the New York media every single week with Russell Wilson and Aaron Rodgers?
Oh, I actually would love to see it just for that.
Right. Yeah.
That would be awful. All right. So we kind of want to go through my coughs. Kind of want to go through.
You're gonna go through your coughs? Please don't.
Yes. Broncos free agents, who we think might resign, who we think might not. And then just kind of go with some potential of what players might bring in. It'll be short and quick. It's not going to be a long, drawn-out thing. Just kind of some thoughts on if this player would be a good fit, if this player would be a good fit. And I've got the visual pulled up here. The visual. I think, personally, you're looking at Will Lutz, PJ Locke, Quinn Bailey maybe coming back.
That's
Cam Fleming also a possibility, I think.
Because you've already got what's his face? Jonas Griffith, he got re-signed.
Well, he was a restricted free agent. He
still got re-signed, didn't he?
Yeah, 1-year deal. But I mean, yeah.
So eat it, Cam.
No, I'm just saying, like he was. There was at least a higher possibility.
He was always going to be back.
Yeah, there was a higher possibility he was going to be back.
Okay, so we're looking 4.
I think kind of like Cam mentioned, Mike Purcell might also be a possibility to come back
at 33.
Looking to bring. I know. I mean, I don't think so, but I think that if the Broncos going to retain somebody from this free agent group on the D line. It's John Harris, but I know Cam was making the argument for Mike Purcell earlier, so I'd love to hear kind of Cam's argument for that.
Well, was one of the things. Well, I think Mike Purcell actually played pretty well. Obviously he played better than DJ Jones last year. But I think that he played rather well with what he has, in terms of, and I don't necessarily even think that maybe he's a DN necessarily. I think he's more of a nose tackle in spurts, and I think that given with where he's at in age, I think that's probably where you're going to have him be. And also, too, we're talking about a player who this has happened twice for. Something to keep in mind. This has happened twice for where he's been cut. They've actually done it to where they've saved some money a little bit for Purcell, and they've actually brought him back. Right? That's happened twice now. So don't be surprised if that's in essence something to where they've done right by Purcell. Kind of letting him go, and they're reworking a little bit of his deal. So I think it's still not out of the realm of possibility that Purcell, is, going to be a Bronco. I think it's actually more positive that he's going to end up being a Bronco. But again, like, I think those are the only two people that you would have on your defensive line. I would move on from Jonathan Harris personally. It was very underwhelming from the start. And when I say the start, I mean, just seeing his name listed on the depth chart initially was very underwhelming. Like, and then to see how it finished ended up being underwhelming. And so I think that for me, I would rather keep Purcell and roll with Zach Allen, but that's not going to deter you because of his age to still upgrade that room and bring some guys in. In fact, actually, one of the more underrated guys that I would watch in that defensive line room now with Jim Leonard in the building is Matt Henningsen.
Sure.
What about Michael Burton?
What about Michael Burton?
Yeah.
I do think that they'll bring him back. A fullback is a pretty critical element of this Sean Payton offense. I don't think Sean's ever not had a fullback. So unless they want to go younger and cheaper there, I do think Mike Burton's a strong candidate to return.
Okay.
Troutman, I saw Richie say something about Troutman. I don't know on Troutman. See, the thing that's so hard with the tight end room, obviously it's just only $3 million. Like, it's only $3.7 million, but like, I'm still under the impression that I would like to have younger guys in that room. And also with Troutman, there was only a very few times where he had yards after catch this year. Like, every time he had the ball, it just seemed like he was running with cinder blocks nearly all the time. Like, he was a little bit slow. And I feel like with Sean Payton's offense, like, you need a tight end that can be able to stretch the field and a tight end that can be that explosive player. And maybe maybe that's a guy like a Lucas Kroll, a Greg Dulcich, if you will, if he's healthy, or they go out and, into the draft and draft a couple guys or whatever, or maybe even, heaven forbid, they maybe do the surprising thing and re-sign Noah Fant back. Right.
You never know, man, but
I was just going to bring that up.
So, I think with Noah Fant, though, it's like, I also felt like Troutman underwhelmed at times as a blocker as well. And sure, you have Chris Manhertz as your primary blocking tight end, but I think that the Broncos are going to be looking for somebody who can provide versatility both as a blocker as well as a receiver. So that's where I think that a guy like a Noah Fant wouldn't necessarily fill that role, because we all know Noah Fant is deficient as a blocker. So I don't know, man. I think that that's where the Broncos need to try to find somebody who can be more versatile, both as a receiver and a blocker at the tight end position.
Agree.
Yeah. All right. So this is the list of free agents, at least on the market this offseason.
These are the top free agents.
Yeah, the top. Well, it's the list of everybody, but I don't know if we're going to get through all of them. Obviously, some of these are going to be on franchise tag. Even if they wanted to, I don't think Denver could afford Kirk Cousins, even if we could get him to come to Denver. So I'm not worried about that.
He can't be franchise tagged either. So
no, no on Ryan Tannehill.
Big no.
No, thank you. Did Chris Jones resign, or is he getting franchise tagged?
I don't know, man. Would he even sign a tag after kind of what they went through last year with him? Like, I think there's kind of a gentleman's agreement that they might actually let him hit free agency.
I heard something like they picked up his club option or something like last week or something. Like there was something that I thought that they were in favor of like picking up a club option or something for him, but I don't see him leaving Kansas City. I mean, one, it's far too much in favor for him to not hit free agency. It's far more likely that he retires at Kansas City Chiefs than it is, hitting free agency, especially given the fact they won the Super Bowl. Had they not won the Super Bowl, I think it would have been a little bit more likely that he's testing the open market. I mean, crazier things have happened, but I mean, there's no way and there's no possible way that Chris Jones would necessarily be hitting that open market. So I think he stays with Kansas City.
I'll counter that though, Cam. It's like he's already got 3 rings. Maybe now he wants his money.
But I think the Kansas City could give it to him.
Do you?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely possible. I mean, I don't know. It's all going to depend on how Kansas City can structure things, because losing Chris Jones would be devastating to that defense. I think we could all definitely agree there, but it's all about really if you can get Chris Jones to agree to it. And it's a good situation there in Kansas City, especially with Steve Spagnuolo. But yeah, I mean, kind of like what Richie brings up here, like they're probably going to have to make a decision here between Chris Jones and L'Jarius Sneed. And if it's me, I'm picking Chris Jones. I'm picking the defensive lineman all day long. They've got a number 1 corner in Trent McDuffie, who's been a number 2 corner for them these past couple of years because L'Jarius Sneed's there. I think McDuffie can step into that cornerback one role stupendously well.
And I'll tell you, not to slide a little bit, to the Broncos, but the Broncos will have a Sneed at cornerback too. So possibly, if the Broncos want to go that route, I mean, maybe they go out and kick the tires a little bit on L'Jarius Sneed. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be upset about that. It's going to cost a very pretty penny, something they won't have. It's possibly a pipe dream scenario, but as we know, the Broncos have a Sneed, their cornerback too.
Yeah. So I kind of want to
imagine.
Go ahead.
A cornerback 1 in L'Jarius Sneed as your cornerback 2. That would be a pipe dream scenario.
But Harrison and Keith Talib.
Yep, literally. Literally.
So I kind of want to limit this down a little bit instead of going through every single person's a free agent because that would take forever. We've already talked about quarterback. We kind of know we think where they're going to go, or we hope where they're going to go. Gage, you'd brought up that you think Denver should move on from Jerry Jeudy. So then what I want to look at is if we do end up moving on from Jerry Jeudy, is there a potential free agent wide receiver that we could afford that could fill in for Jerry Jeudy?
Is Jawan Jennings a free agent?
He is, but I mean, I feel like that's a pipe dream. But I mean, yeah, he is a free agent.
It is a pipe dream, but man, Jawan Jennings is your wide receiver too. Yes, please. Can you scroll back up?
There's a lot of options. Brandon and I, when we did mainly, looked at the wide receiver room last week. There's a lot of options here.
Calvin Ridley, honestly, I would not hate whatsoever. I would love Calvin Ridley.
Thank you. I have been on that train, for
17.
I mean, I
don't think he gets that much.
I don't think he gets that much, but I'll tell you, I think that the point I've been making is regardless if you have Jerry Jeudy in the roster, regardless if you have Cortland Sutton on the roster, you need to be making upgrades to that room regardless, because that wide receiver room lacks a wide receiver one that's a dog. And I'm not saying that Calvin Ridley is maybe not necessarily that guy. I feel like that guy would necessarily be in the draft. But I feel like, if you move on from guys like, say, a Cortland Sutton or a Jerry Jeudy, I wouldn't be upset or even surprised if we talked about the quarterback room getting a reclamation project. Let me tease a little bit of what I mentioned last week. Let's say you go out and you sign Calvin Ridley, right? You go out and you sign Calvin Ridley. Well, how about you go and you sign a reclamation project who is, Mr. Versatile, who's probably had his career a little bit, shot a little bit with where he's been with playing with Urban Meyer, and then, being down there in Carolina in a really dumpster fire of an organization. He's from the Colorado area. Mr. Laviska Shenault, I think, would be a fascinating reclamation project with Sean Payton, given the versatility. You put him with Sean, the things that he could possibly do with him. And then the possibilities are endless. Like, let's say you draft Malachi Corley, the possibilities are endless for possibly what you can do with a guy like Laviska Shenault, Ridley, and then a Malachi Corley.
Mm-hmm.
What about a Gabe Davis?
Yeah.
I think he's probably going to get overpaid. Someone's going to overpay Gabe Davis. 13.6, that's rich for my blood for a Gabe Davis. He's fine, but he's like the definition of a mid-wide receiver for me.
I will say, and this is something we should circle back on, because the Broncos had kicked the tires on a guy like an Alan Lazard. It's one of the reasons why I feel like the Courtland Sutton trade could be in the works. One, he's got the best trade value, and two, if you look at that open market, they have some replaceable players on that open market if they wanted a guy like that. I don't know what the market value would be necessarily for a guy like Michael Pittman, but Michael Pittman would certainly be an option.
Josh Reynolds, maybe?
Yeah, Josh Reynolds. Maybe a Tyler Boyd.
I wouldn't hate Tyler Boyd either. I saw a comment that was suggesting Tyler Boyd.
I mean, it's 8.7. I mean, I think that the ones that I would truly stay away from, I see Biggie Bronco mentioning Chase Claypool. I would stay away from him. He's been a locker room cancer, since he's been with Pittsburgh, or I should say.
Good for your TikTok, though.
Yeah. He and Juju Smith-Schuster would do quite well, with their TikTok content. DJ Chark, I think, would be another one. So, I mean, like, if you do move on from Courtland, I feel like the possibilities are a little bit greater for you of replacing a guy like Courtland in terms of the free agency market. And obviously, that's a decision you would have to make a little bit sooner rather than later if you want to make the decision to move on from Courtland with looking at the market. But, I mean, we also have to keep in mind, too, is like, and this is not just looking at the wide receivers, there are players that will not sign right away. Like Odell Beckham Jr. didn't necessarily sign right away. He signed at the latter point, I think into training camp. So the moves we think that they possibly could make in tier 2 might actually end up in tier 50, which is into training camp because bodies are being injured and stuff like that. So, I mean, there are players that do last a little bit longer and just haven't been signed yet.
And to that point, Cam, I see somebody who kind of fits that bill in Kendrick Bourne. He's played well for the Patriots when he's been healthy. He just last year tore his ACL, and in previous years just hasn't been all that healthy. $4.8 million. I think you could maybe get him a little cheaper than that. That would intrigue me. Kendrick Bourne, and he could be somebody coming off that ACL you could sign in that tier 50 free agent category before training camp, and he could make an impact. I think it also is going to all depend on what they do with Tim Patrick. The assumption is that Tim Patrick is going to be cut on his current deal, but I have heard some pretty strong rumblings that they will bring him back on a cheaper deal. I've heard this from some pretty reliable sources. Tim Patrick is coveted in that building. He's one of the biggest leaders in that whole locker room. You can see him on the sidelines on game day, gassing up his teammates. Everybody loves Timmy P. I think that there's going to be a strong likelihood the Denver Broncos bring Tim Patrick back on a reduced rate, but that's coming from some pretty reliable sources that
Well, that's one of the other things I was going to bring up is even if you move on from a Jerry Jeudy, do you even bring in somebody new? Or do you just move Marvin Mims over? You still have Tim Patrick you can put in there. You still have if we bring back little Jordan Humphrey and Brandon Johnson and all these other guys, do you need to bring in someone else?
It depends if Sean Phil, and this is probably the point, is it feels like if Sean Payton actually feels like they legitimately fit that role, like they fit that role. And I really don't think the Tim Patrick stuff is being talked about all that much, really. Like, I really don't. I mean, because I think that your most logical person to possibly replace Cortland Sutton may actually be in-house with Tim Patrick. Like, we can talk about the options, on the free agent market, which there are legitimate options, right? There are legitimate options on that market. But I think that the Tim Patrick stuff, once again, is like there's some legitimate stuff, I feel like, to that. But to that point, even if you move on from Cortland and you even are relying on Tim Patrick again, Tim Patrick's coming off of injury. So I would not shy away from this idea that you still go out and you sign, a guy, that can possibly, be a guy that's a nice other veteran for that room. You know what I mean? But the thing is, like, we can add some of these bodies to that room. But I once again, I feel like the Broncos really do lack that dominant wide receiver one. Now, my personal opinion is that's going to come in the draft. But in order for that to come in the draft, you gotta select it in probably your first 2 picks, right? You got to select it in your first 2 picks, possibly, for you to get that wide receiver one.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about quarterback, we've talked wide receiver, and what potentially the options are. I think the biggest concern that we have at this point is defensive line.
Anywhere.
Interior defensive line, anywhere in that front 7. I think that's where we're going to have the biggest problem. Is there anybody in here that we can afford, or you think we can afford, that is an interesting option to pick up?
The key phrase, we should, say that until the dogs come home, that we can afford. We should say that there are some fascinating names. Sheldon Rankins is one. He's got a lot of familiarity with Sean Payton. I would not hate this idea. And we talked about it a little bit with the wide receiver room, obviously a little bit earlier, about possibly maybe you sign 2 wide receivers to upgrade that room, if you will. You don't necessarily go to the draft maybe, but you upgrade that room, the wide receiver room. I could see this scenario necessarily playing out with the defensive line, right? Because like that's a case where you could actually sign some multiple guys. And DJ Reader, I don't think is going to be a possibility for the Broncos, but it's worth mentioning because DJ Reader was actually close to signing with the Denver Broncos, if I'm not mistaken, the last free agency cycle. He chose the Bengals over the Broncos, which we all know ended up being the smartest decision, of course. Marcus Davenport is another one.
Another Sean Payton guy.
Another Sean Payton guy. And that's in terms of edge rusher. So I think that so there's some definite cases where they can go for it. I think if you want to go out and you want to maybe get an edge rusher, like a dominant edge rusher, this is a case where how good do you feel about that room? How good do you feel about that room? Because this is a case where you can feel pretty good about that room, but if they are just full of number 2 guys, it may be worth spending, money on, a guy like maybe a Chase Young, maybe getting Chase Young, but maybe because he's so unpredictable, you go out and you get a Chase Young, and you also get, excuse me, you go out and you sign sign like a guy like maybe like a Javon Kinlaw, right? I see Javon Kinlaw there also. But I mean, like you go a little bit more, like guys like that, like Kinlaw, maybe a Chase Young, but then Marcus Davenport too. So if you feel like you can sign 2 guys that can really upgrade that room and get an interior guy, maybe a Shelby Harris. I just think the possibilities.
Yeah.
The possibilities I feel like are endless, in my opinion, on the defensive line for what the Broncos could do.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to Shelby, they brought him in for a workout this past offseason before he signed with the Cleveland Browns, and they ultimately decided not to give him a deal. So there's a part of me that feels like the ship has sailed there with Shelby Harris. And another guy on the interior that I feel like always gets talked about here in Denver when he gets on the free agent market because he is a Denver native is Calais Campbell. I think that that's somebody who's going to get brought up at least once or twice. And I thought he played pretty well for the Atlanta Falcons last year. So if you want to bring into a piece to upgrade your interior defensive line, maybe this is finally the year they bring Calais Campbell home.
Yeah. I mean, what was it? Was it when he left Jacksonville, or was it when he left Arizona when he was really close to signing with Denver? Like
I
he was
believe it was when he
left
went to
Arizona.
when he left Arizona to go to Jacksonville.
Yeah, because that was the point where like it was a family decision. I think it was like he asked his wife, like, where do you want to go? Like maybe it felt like, you know, for Calais he wanted to go to Denver, but his wife was leaning him, you know, to go to Arizona, right, or to Jacksonville. And we all know happy wife, happy life. So whatever she says goes. Ooh.
Hello.
That's a big number.
Maybe he wants to go chase that, man. I think someone will give it to him. I really do.
Yeah. And then the other one that we kind of need to take a look at is linebacker. If Josie Jewell moves on to another team, do we go with Drew Sanders at inside linebacker, or do we bring one in?
Do you want to take this one, Gage?
There have been some rumblings out there of potentially Drew Sanders staying on at edge rusher full time. So that would open up a need for the Denver Broncos at off-ball linebacker. Of course, Josie Jewell coming back is a possibility. There have also been some rumors out there of Patrick Queen coming to the Denver Broncos. But if you want to pull up his market value, Mike,
boom,
$18.5 million, baby. That would be a big fat no. I'm not the hugest fan personally of giving off-ball linebackers that caliber of money. Now, see, Levante David would kind of be a pipe dream scenario for me. He's one of those guys where I just don't see him wearing a uniform other than a Tampa Bay Buccaneers uniform, but he is a Nebraska Cornhusker. I know that tickles Cam's fancy.
Tickles his something.
Oh, man. I trust me. I have a bit of an emotional connection to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers because my good friend Robbie's a Buccaneers fan. So, yes, I would absolutely love Levante David. I just don't see it. Devin Bush
he's the most underrated linebacker of maybe this decade.
Agreed, dude. He's Hall of Famer for me. He really
Devin
is.
Bush or Devin White? Oh, Devin Bush.
Bush. I don't like Devin White. That's the other Tampa Bay Buccaneers linebacker. He was literally benched as a run defender this year. He's a liability in tackling. I don't want Devin White. We already have one linebacker who's kind of a liability in open field tackling at times, and Alex Singleton. So, yeah, no, I'm good there. Can you scroll back up a little bit? Willie Gay's a free agent?
He is.
Oh, dude. Market value, please.
7.
What? No. Oh my God. Dude, I'd be happy to spend $10 million for Willie Gay. I would do it.
Gage just came in his pants a little bit.
So the thing is, like, I just don't know.
Oh God.
So the thing that I just don't see him signing with a division rival. Like that's just
I don't either, but my God, pipe dream.
Yeah, $7 million. I tell you, there are a few linebackers though that are on that list, and Jordan Hicks is one that certainly comes to mind. A lot of familiarity with Vance Joseph. Obviously,
that makes a lot of sense.
Jordan Brooks, who's coming from Seattle, ironically. But I mean, Zach Cunningham is maybe another one, but I mean, like, he didn't necessarily amount to much. Shaq Leonard may be a fascinating one, given with what he had, you know, with Philly, and, you know, really didn't do much necessarily for Philly. But I mean, so there's some interesting names out there. I mean,
Jacob Phillips, actually, he played well as a reserve guy for Cleveland. He could be a sneaky cheap option, and he's a UFA too. Jacob Phillips might actually be an interesting, like, under the radar guy.
One of the other guys, and it's at least maybe mentioning this, and I don't see his name on there, at least from what I can tell, but it was a name that Mike Kliss mentioned in one of his articles, and it was Blake Cashman.
Oh, yes.
And yeah, so Blake, Yeah, so I don't know where he necessarily got that from, but Blake Cashman might necessarily be a name to file away. Now, the running back position will be probably a fascinating one.
You know, with Blake Cashman, low key, he was the Texans' defensive MVP last year. Let's see, contract. He's a free agent. Dude, I actually think Blake Cashman could be a really good fit. He's really sound in coverage. He's sound as a run defender. He was the best off-ball guy for the Texans last year, and they had some good guys in there like Denzel Perryman as well. And I thought Blake Cashman stood out as the best guy of the bunch. He may be a guy that the Texans prioritize re-signing, but if he hits the market, Denver should absolutely give him a call.
Yeah, Blake Cashman, you know, he's basically, this is my comparison. This is funny enough because he plays with the Houston Texans. But he is what who was the linebacker that went AWOL for Houston?
Brian Cushing?
Yeah, he almost reminds me a little bit of Brian Cushing to a certain extent. Yeah, but without the without the head case.
Yes. No, again, like I absolutely would love Blake Cashman. That's somebody who I was quite impressed with watching quite a bit of Houston Texans tape last year. And especially, I think he kind of lit up the board against Denver a little bit in that game. So if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, Blake Cashman is somebody I'd wholeheartedly endorse.
Yeah. I think that's gonna about do it for tonight's show, just because I'm exhausted. I want to go. I've had enough talking about people that make more money than me. So do we have anything else that we want to cover real quick? Any little tidbits you have? Any inside information that you want to talk about before we leave?
I mean, no, not necessarily, but I mean, just real quick, as far as some other, maybe positions we didn't necessarily touch on, I would think that, again, I'm not advocating for the running back position, but we know that Sean Payton and George Payton have really made it a priority to attack the running back position. So, and especially given maybe how loaded that running back group is in free agency, might want to kind of keep an eye on some of those names down there in free agency. One guy in particular that I'm very curious of is DeAndre Swift with Sean Payton. That's one guy I'm very curious of. And then as far as on the back end and the secondary, and when I say secondary, I mean safety. There's a safety that is on the open market who has relation ties to a safety that actually played for the Broncos, and his name is Steve Atwater. That, of course, being Jeremy Chin. Jeremy Chin is on the market, and he is one that is he you could call it a dream target for me, but it also seems to be rather a logical target for me. I mean, you can sign him for cheap. You put him in that room. So those two are kind of guys that I'm kind of keeping my eye on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball there.
I'm glad you touched on the running back position, because I don't necessarily know if the Broncos do this, but they can save $3 million if they move on from Samaje Perine. So if they want to get younger and cheaper there, I could see a scenario where they bring in somebody of maybe the lower caliber running back tier in free agency, and then maybe bring in some more of those assets in the draft, or where Denver's been successful finding running backs, undrafted free agency.
I'm pretty sure the Lions would be willing to trade Jahmyr Gibbs.
Oh yeah,
so.
Yeah.
I have a tendency to force trades all the time on PFF. So
see, there we go. It's just,
or we could just go down the free agent pipeline and sign King Henry.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you could. All right. Well, obviously, be watching more episodes of the podcast on the network. We will be deep diving more into free agency, who we could bring in, who we might let go, whether it's on the 5280 or mainly. And I know you can check out Bronco Syndicate with Gage. He'll be making videos as well on players leaving or coming in. So make sure you check out all the shows on the network. We got shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the neighborhood, which does Broncos and Avalanche games on game days. So make sure you check that out. We appreciate every single person joining us in the chat. Clayton, Spence, Biggie, Bronco. We had Rich. We had Sports Nonsense and Whiskey, One-Eyed Jacks. I want to thank everybody for joining us in the chat. I'm going to stop talking before my voice goes. So we appreciate you. We love you. We love the Broncos. Peace out.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down.